All right, so I think that we are mostly all here. And if that is the case, Ms. Lamendola, we just got done with Public Works.
Yes, so up next would be quality of life, and we will take a minute to talk about the zoo. Brendan, are you available? Yeah, there he is.
I am. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mayor, members of the council. My plan in the next 15 minutes is just to give a real brief overview about the change in budget from 2020 to 2021, and then spend most of the time talking about why we would consider a potential rate increase. So overall, really the budget going from 2020 to 2021 leaves all of the programs that the zoo currently operates intact. There are some budget fluctuations here and there. We did make an effort to try to right size the cost for utilities, animal food, and the amount of money we spend on medications and medical care. But the same programs of animal health, animal care, conservation and education, as well as our grounds maintenance and guest experience will still continue the same. Before we talk about a rate increase, are there any specific questions relating to the zoo's operating budget?
Any questions for, okay, Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What page are we on?
In the budget book would really be on page 121.
Okay, thank you, Brendan.
And I don't know if any of you are doing what I'm doing. I have a double screen and I have the budget on one side. I discovered a neat trick, and I don't know if I'm the only one that didn't know, that you could type in on the numbers of the page number, and it just takes you right there, and have to do what I was doing at first, just like rapidly scrolling up and down. You may proceed, Brandon.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share, I think. So when we talk about a zoo admission rate, we're typically talking about, there we go, kind of that factor of accessibility for the community into the zoo. Like most zoos, ours is a public zoo, it's a municipal asset. There's a budget line in the city's operating budget that represents a significant amount of expense. So then we charge an admission fee, which generalized helps users pay for part of that operating expense of the zoo. We're a small to medium-sized zoo, and typically a zoo with a 1 or 2 hour zoo experience uses the cost of a movie ticket as a benchmark. When we talk about community accessibility here, historically we've been a zoo that's had a reasonable ticket price. A few years ago, we implemented a library pass program so that if you have a library card and you cannot afford to come to the zoo, you can go to the library, you can check out a pass for up to 4 people, and that will grant you free admission into the zoo. And then typically throughout the year, we may have 3 to 4 other opportunities for people to come with either not having to pay anything or a greatly reduced rate. The past several years, Edward Jones has partnered with us on May 29th to do the 529 day, really promoting to young parents to start saving for college expenses. In the past, we've been free on Veterans Day. Last year, we tried to kind of move that out more into a more user-friendly time of year. And also we've seen an uptick on corporations sponsoring admission for a day, all in line with improving accessibility to the zoo. So why we're in this conversation this year is, simply put, to try to alleviate some of the budget restraints on the city's general fund. We went through a process that was studying all of our buildings and each one of our animals in regards to how much does it cost to care for X. And to help us really come in line with the needs of the general fund, we evaluated some areas that we could reduce programming. But I think the preference was to, instead of reducing programming, try to increase our admission fee so that those that come to the zoo are helping offset those costs to the general fund. So to put this kind of in perspective, these admission rates are current as of this morning. The Sunset Zoo in Manhattan, Kansas, I would consider to be a slightly smaller zoo and zoo experience than we are. Sedgwick County Zoo is obviously a large full day experience, as is the Rolling Hills Zoo in Salina, if you do the museum with that. I went ahead and included the Kansas City Zoo, the Henry Doorly Zoo, just because of their proximity. But I would consider the Blank Park Zoo in Des Moines and the Tulsa Zoo to be more of our benchmark zoos. And today you can see that we charge $7.75 for an adult, $6.25 for a child. What we're proposing is to increase our admission rate $2 across the board, to the point where we would be charging $9.75 for an adult, $8.25 for a child, which, if you believe in that benchmark approach with using a movie ticket as your guideline, it's still within that realm, and it's still comparable to some of the zoos around us. And I think at this point, I'll go ahead and pause and see if anyone has any questions regarding this.
Questions for Brendan about the zoo structures and the fees? Councilman Lesser, I see that you unmuted.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hey, good to see you, Brendan. Hey,
Too much.
question for you, brother. Tell me a little bit, it's not on here, but tell me a little bit about the concessions that we have. Do we try to keep that fairly moderate? What I'm getting at is, I know times that we've gone to Tulsa Zoo and Omaha Zoo, it's a little bit like going to Worlds of Fun, and a pop or a Royals game, a pop is $10, you know what I mean? Tell me a little bit what our thought process is on that, because I just wanted to balance that relative to a rate increase on the admission.
Sure. Probably at the same time, if we raise our rate of admission, we would reevaluate on the Friends of the Zoo side, cost of membership. There needs to be some sort of balance, or else one stream of revenue strips the other. If our single day tickets suddenly cost 70% of what a family membership does, then everybody's going to be buying memberships. To your specific point about concession and even gift sales, both of those programs are operated by Friends of the Zoo. In 2018, that was our last rate increase. Friends of the Zoo did a pretty extensive survey and meeting with focus groups. And at that point in time, not that we want to be giving away all of our secrets, but we had about 100% markup on both food, beverage, and gift. Today, most of those are marked up at about 300%. But you are exactly right. Other amusement parks, other attractions are 500 to 600% markups for that same reason of helping to support the bottom line. It's a little hard to relate that in our situation because of the two organizations that operate here. If there is a further markup on food, beverage, or gift, that will support Friends of the Zoo, not the general fund, the way we're set up today.
Okay. Thank you. I would just wanted that for reference of what the total experience cost was for, there again, it's kind of like going to a movie as well, your ticket. A lot of times, the cheapest thing I buy at the movie is the ticket.
Yes, sir.
We have Councilman Duncan also has questions, to be followed by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and Councilwoman Ortiz.
So 2 questions. First of all, what is considered child age for that child ticket price?
Between 3 and 12.
Okay.
Under 3 is free, and over 12, we charge the adult rate. And that's, we rely on who the child comes with for that information.
Sure. And I know this is a future discussion, so I'm asking that, keeping that in mind. But of that list of zoos with comparable of the prices you showed us, do you know off the top of your head how many of those are municipal zoos versus private entities?
I do. I'm trying to put that list back up. Although I have a friend who unplugged one of the cables under my computer, so I can't get my other screen to work at the moment. If I recall the list, the Sunset Zoo in Manhattan, Kansas is city-owned and city-operated. The Rolling Hill Zoo in Salina, Kansas is a 100% privately operated 501c3. The Sedgwick County Zoo has, for the most part, is privately operated, but does have some county staff that are still employed there. Kansas City, Omaha, Blank Park, and Tulsa are all operated by a nonprofit organization like Friends of the Zoo.
Gotcha.
But they are publicly owned facilities.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala?
Thank you, Mayor. So what you're saying is with this rate increase of $2 across the board, then that was a yes for that. The concessions might be going up as well in the gift shop, or no? I didn't get that.
There is no plan to do that at this point.
Okay. And with the option to not cut programming, did you look at programming at all? And if you did look at programming, what were you looking that may have been comparable in cost savings to cut rather than increase the price to the public?
We did, and we looked at what buildings could we close and capture savings based on a reduction in number of animals, number of staff, and utilities and food that would save.
Mm-hmm.
Parallel to that, we did a survey, both through the form of an exit survey as people left the zoo, and online survey with our members to make sure that if we went down that road,
Did he freeze? Okay. I don't know what up. He froze.
Yeah, it are having an issue with our system. And sometimes our screen gets frozen. It seems like Mr. Wiley has been unfrozen now, so he can proceed with his.
Okay, I apologize, not knowing where I left off.
So
We
you were
did-
looking at the program cuts and
Survey.
what buildings to perhaps shut down or et cetera.
Yes.
So,
You know, we put together essentially a menu that is, if we're looking at this amount of a reduction, we could do that by cutting this number of animal programs that would require less staff, less utilities, less food, et cetera.
and you believed it just wasn't worth that trade-off, that the public would be best served if there was a price increase rather than a decrease in programming.
I would defer to the city manager to answer that. I think my belief would be very biased that that's more his choice in how to prepare the budget, whether to do it through a form of reduction or do it through a form of increased cost.
City manager?
Thank you, Mayor. What we looked at is some of those exhibits that are there have aging animals. And I think that what we'll see is that eventually those types of changes of closing buildings and or eliminating exhibits will happen once those animals pass on. And so for me, at this point, if you raise the rate and you keep that level of availability of what can be seen makes more sense than taking away and eventually, having less available. Some of those exhibits are very popular, and I'd hate to see someone not be able to go see the hippo or not be able to see the orangutans or the sun bear. And to move those away was not really something that I wanted to see happen. I think if they still think they're getting a good product, they'll go ahead and pay, given as where we are comparable to other zoos. And so I think it'd be better to go ahead and do it on this route, especially given that there are other options, so that if with the free days and the free pass from the library, and those good sponsors that Brendan makes contact with will make the zoo accessible for people still. And so at this point, I think going ahead and raising the rate, we're in a good spot to be able to do that and not affect things as badly, rather than doing away with animals when there are still good, popular exhibits.
Right. Thank you, City Manager. When you said programming, I didn't know that actually meant animal exhibits versus programming that was done in conjunction with the animal exhibits that would reduce costs. The other thing is that I do believe it's important to have those good corporate sponsors, the free days, because we know that a lot of struggling young families, families of color as well, a lot of folks during COVID time and the recovery from that, which who knows how long it's going to take, those are high prices. So I would just hope that whatever moves are made in this way, be cognizant to still have those reduced or free days or tickets, so that all citizens can have at least one or two visits a year to the zoo. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
We have now Councilwoman Ortiz.
Yes, thank you. Brendan, do we have a special cost for the elderly and the disabled?
We do. We have a senior rate that is about 50, it's not about, it is 50 cents less than what the adult admission rate is. And we probably need to look at that. And, when the admission rate was $5.75 and the senior rate was $5.25, that felt right. If the admission rate for an adult is going to be $9.75, the rate for a senior probably needs to be, in that $7 range. So we'll evaluate that separately. That is a good point, Councilwoman.
Well, and I know that's their pay doesn't go up any, and I just hate to cut them out because a lot of them, that's I took my grandkids and there was an elderly man and he was talking about the animals and educating them. So that's just something that they can do. But how do we go about getting corporate sponsors?
Again, this is kind of one of those lines that's it's always awkward to talk about when we're talking budget. There's two organizations that work here, Friends of the Zoo, the City of Topeka. Most of our corporate sponsorships are done through Friends of the Zoo's Business Partner Program. However, we do see some benefits through that. For example, this year, Schindel Pest Control signed on for a business partner program. Schindel Pest Control provides pest control services for the zoo, all of our animal areas. And when you do that for animal areas, it's a very challenging task because any chemicals you have to use can't harm our animals. So they donated their service in exchange for Friends of the Zoo promotions, event tickets, and it will save us $11,000 this year. So that the savings that we get or that we experience sometimes don't come directly to the city, but are focused more through Friends of the Zoo.
Thank you. And then also, since we're looking at increasing the tickets, admission, I was wondering, are we going to increase the hours? Because, me and you've had this conversation. A lot of people, they want to go after work and take their kids, and a lot of people have experienced just the animals coming alive, So have we looked at that in any type of way?
We did start the conversation as a staff here at the zoo at our last all-staff meeting from the standpoint, and if I was to be completely candid, the challenge is how can you have your product 90%, 95% when the gates open at 9 and maybe if you're staying open till 7 or 8 at the same time. Do you have enough staff to bring in early in the morning to do that and still close things at the end of the day? When we talked as a team about our admission rate potentially going up, I think our entire team here realizes that we've got to provide a 95 to 100% product the entire time we're open. And today, if you're out here after 3:30, I don't know that we feel like it is at that level that we would like it to be at. So, don't know what the solution is. We're going to work on it as one team, and not only because of the rate increase, but we're about to open a Japanese garden, and that is just begging to be open in the evening. So we do need to figure that out.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I know that we have a bunch of questions. I think we have 2 council members that are pending. I think Nager was one waiting, and we have Councilman Duncan. I don't want to limit discussion, but I know the staff is wanting to make sure that we can hit everything before 1 o'clock. So if you could make your remarks and questions, and if Brendan, if you feel like the answers require a deeper discussion, maybe we could just send everybody on the team an email afterwards. Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
And I'll use less words.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Wiley, talking about kind of having the flexibility in donating services in order to support the zoo, is that done through Friends of the Zoo because of the maybe more of the complications and stipulations within working through city government, or is that something that's pretty flexible for people to donate services?
We make it extremely flexible to donate services. Usually that's easiest to accommodate on the Friends of the Zoo side as the 501c3. And quite honestly, the 501c3 has an easier time of trading things for services than a municipal organization does, where that can sometimes cross lines.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Councilman Duncan.
If you had a fee increase, what do you estimate the revenue it would generate is?
You know, I knew somebody was going to ask that question. The
Gotta believe you've
answer's a
done the
little
numbers.
complicated. So if this doesn't make sense, I'll send out a detailed explanation later. A $2 rate increase generates approximately $171,000 of revenue. Now, from that, Friends of the Zoo typically earns about 13% of our admission income. Additionally, in prior years, the revenue goal has been set at what I call an aspirational level. In 2019, even though we had 224,000 people come here, we were still off our revenue goal by $86,000. So this $2 fee essentially makes it possible for us to meet our revenue goal, covers the associated fees with Friends of the Zoo, and generates a net additional income of about $62,000, about 2.5% of our budget.
Okay, could you just email me or us a breakdown of what a $2 increase would be adult versus child based on your, because I know those numbers are significant. I know there's probably get a lot more children than adults to the zoo that pay. But if you don't have to give it to me now, but if you could provide us the difference in child admissions based on admission numbers, what the difference in those would be. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand what you're asking. Some of that information is going to have to come from a Friends of the Zoo database. They do our admission process. Interestingly enough, though, 49% of the people that pay admission are children.
Okay,
There it is.
okay. Thanks.
All right.
Quick questions, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I ask a couple quick? I really will. Is this
Sure.
rate increase in the budget now that we're looking at?
I believe it is.
Well,
Bueller? Hello, anyone?
We could
Okay, I
barely
can hear
hear.
Spencer.
is this rate increase in the budget that we are looking at today?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Just to confirm once again, we are still, I think it's good to bring this up and have this conversation. We've been talking about transitioning the zoo to being much more independent. That is still continuing?
I would say, yes, it's continuing, but currently paused.
Correct.
Oh. Okay. I didn't, well, I thought we were still continuing on, and this is the kind of thing that if we let the zoo go more independently, they will be considering on their own without us, I presume, and so that's why I felt it was good to have this conversation now. Just for what it's worth, I think that the comparison to movie tickets is good in that I personally would like to see the kid rates kept as low as possible so that families feel like they can go, that it's an affordable alternative. But I also understand rate increases. That's it. Thank you. Everybody's frozen, so I guess nobody heard a word of it.
So
Okay,
the suggestion that you had, Councilwoman Hiller, was to change to not raise the child rate as much. Is that what you were saying? We had a hard time hearing.
I'm sorry, you were frozen. I was just putting in my thought only that
Okay.
I appreciate affordability for kids. A lot of people don't go to the movies because it's too expensive. I understand that a rate increase needs to be considered, and I was just throwing a comment in.
Okay, thank you. We'll
Yeah.
take that into consideration.
all right. Well, thank you so much, Brendan. If there's anything that you feel that you need to provide more in-depth information onto the council based on the comments today, please, if you could write a memo through Ms. Lamandola, that would be phenomenal. Ms. Lamandola?
All right, so our next section will be developing neighborhoods, and planning and development will be the first department. So I'll hand it over to Bill.
All right, thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Actually, almost good afternoon. I am pleased to present an overview of our 2021 budget, which you can find. It starts on page 112 through 120. And you will see that we're broken up into two divisions, a planning division and a development service division. Planning deals with everything through the planning phase of land development. And then development services basically picks up when you hit construction phase to deal with all the permitting, inspections, and occupancy. So that's that's functionally how we operate. The budget itself is a hair over $3 million altogether, which is about 2% reduction from previous year. We have a few things on both the negative side of the ledger as well as the positive side of the ledger to just highlight here. And so starting on the negative side of the ledger, we did reduce contracts, our contractual services for outsourcing planning, and we just have the minimum amount to do our federally mandated regional transportation plan next year that we do every 5 years. We will be opting out of or deferring our fleet reserve payment next year, and delays replacing one of our fleet cars that the inspectors use. We'll also reduce our internal fee to the inmate crew that helps us with removal of temporary signs in the right of way. And then also training, as you've heard from other departments, we've cut that quite a bit. And we have almost everybody, I won't say everybody, but more than half of our staff is certified, whether it's on the planning side or the development service side. So the impact is unknown, but we're going to do everything we can to keep those folks trained and certified. So on the positive side of the ledger, we actually came up with a couple revenue sources that were new. We were able to propose shiftings, transportation planning grant funds to offset some general fund costs of staff. We just have some people that are eligible for those grants, and we haven't been applying those as much, I guess, as we could be. So that'll be about 35 to 40,000 of the shift. We're also proposing a increase in the same-day permit fee. Same-day inspection fee. This is it's a $50 fee that we charge. It's kind of a surcharge for people that call in the same day expecting an inspection. And we feel it's been used to the point where if you increase it or double it, it will not be as much of a hardship. It's proposed to raise about 18,000 in new revenue. So there are no recommended position reductions in the budget. We will be able to operate our core functions here in the department as we've come to expect in the past without significant impact. I would say our goals of continuing to do our planning work, which we do mostly in-house anyway. Our code updates, whether it's on the building and trade side or the zoning code side, we will continue to bring to you. We do those in-house and we keep our codes up to today's standards. And then lastly, we will continue to expand our online presence on the permitting side and contractor licensing side and really help our customer service. We are looking to fill a position and that will also help us on the permit processing side. So I think those having that ability to do that is still there going into 2021. So with that, I will, that's my high level overview, and I'll stand for any questions at this time.
Questions for Mr. Fyander? Okay, you may proceed, Mr. Fyander.
Back to Jessica.
Thanks, Bill. The next section that we'll be looking at is the Department of Neighborhood Relations, and the city manager will take over that discussion.
So as we know, we went through a process and made the decision, I made the decision to eliminate the director of the neighborhood relations. I've sent you all a proposed plan for implementation of moving those divisions underneath the other departments, and that will become final as far as a temporary as of next Monday. There'll be emails going out to the division heads and directors so that they can begin that process. But for simplistic sake in the budget, given the timing that we're involved, we've kept the neighborhood relations budget intact in order to show you the functions that they will do when we come back for looking at the budget for 2022. These divisions will be underneath their respective departments. But for simplistic sakes in comparison, it was better to do it this way, given the timing. So basically, in the neighborhood relations department, you eliminate the director's position. We had an office specialist that was changed over to the housing services. A lot of that has to do with some of the monies that we're receiving from CARES Act. We'll be able to cover that with grant funding, and they will be busier doing some of those functions within the housing services area. One thing, when you look at the total numbers for that department, it doesn't change, even though you know you eliminated the director position. We increased a position of program coordinator for the Impact Avenues program. We have a 3-year grant that we're using in order to help affect the issues of child homelessness. And so that program is ongoing and was not in the budget in last year. And even though we did begin to do that in 19, it's not in the 20 budget. So that keeps our number the same as far as number of FTEs related to the department. Also, there are monies that relate to reductions in costs. We'll have one less inmate crew, which is reflected by lower expense and funding. So it's a corresponding increase, decrease both in the revenues and in the expenses related to that. And then moving some numbers related to the street maintenance was funded out of the department. We did reduce demolitions from 275 to 200,000. That will still give us some funding to be able to do emergency demolitions that occur typically when it relates to a fire and other specific locations. This amount has been something that we've been working on reducing over the last few years. And so this amount is really about probably as far as we'll want to go in this line item. And we'll see whether this is sufficient to get through the year. We may need to look at increasing it in the future. The important thing is that social service grants were funded at the 2020 level in the 2021 budget. Some thought that, at least we looked at that possibility of no longer doing that. This is $440,000 in general fund money that's given out to other social service agencies. But given a lot of the things that have been discussed and going on in the country, we need to continue to support those social service organizations. We get a big bang for the buck related to them, and it's important that we continue that. It was brought up earlier, there was a question related specifically to empowerment funding, and so I wanted to go ahead and cover that here too. One of the things that we found from the housing study was that there is a lot of a need for weatherization type projects to be done on homes. And so to support that, I looked at taking of the 137,000 that had been budgeted in empowerment in the past, and taking 60,000, keeping it into the empowerment type programs, and then the other 77,000 would be shifted over to the weatherization. The idea being is that it's hard to have neighborhoods if we don't have people living in homes in the neighborhoods. And so shifting some of the focus to be able to do the weatherization programs and keep it going, basically as seed money that we hope will eventually maybe even be put into the Housing Trust Fund from other organizations and start doing more of the weatherization. And you'll see that that is one of the priorities that are recommendations that come from the housing study. So that's why the change was made. Obviously, that decision finally would be up to you whether that makes sense as far as a change in program.
Questions for Mr. Child, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, so 137,000, 77,000 you believe should go to weatherization, and then 60,000 to stay with the empowerment grants. So community action does a great deal of weatherization. Is there a specific reason why we want to increase? I mean, is it because you just think we're going to get more calls on it, or there's going to be more of a need because of COVID and less money for folks, or?
I think that the need is greater than what they're already doing. And I think that based on what we're hearing from the process that was gone through and from the different third parties out there that have talked with us through this whole process, the weatherization needs to have an extra emphasis put on it, that we're not getting through to each of those homes. And so putting some additional funding there would be beneficial.
And with the 60,000 that is maintained in the empowerment grants, I heard from someone that this is going to reduce the amount of NIAs that will qualify for applying for these funds, so 60,000. Is that true, or is that?
Yeah, I don't think that as many will be able to be funded. And I think that, honestly, I think some of what we've been seeing too is the type of projects that were coming through empowerment that we're not getting as many good projects coming through, yet feeling obligated to go ahead and fund because that's what the neighborhoods were requesting. So we wanted to look at better projects, and so this still allows some funding. And I know Monique is on here too, and she can cover what some of those changes were going to be as far as the program with empowerment.
And well, I guess then this would be a question maybe for both you and for Monique as this was discussed, I guess why we would think that we have a better thought process than what the neighborhoods believe that their needs are. I mean, one of the things that we continue to be challenged with, take for example, the SORT grant that's happening in East Topeka North, is that, you know, everyone's working really hard to get homeowners and businesses to attend the meetings, because I've been told by the department, we don't want to have to make these decisions, for constituents. So I guess I don't understand that rationale. Can you explain it? Can somebody explain that to me?
Well,
not liking the project. I mean, not believing the project, the neighborhood associations wanted were the best, but you had to fund them. I mean, come on.
Well, but I mean, I think you look at what is really helping the neighborhood. And I mean, obviously there were some really good projects that were being done in neighborhoods, fixing sidewalks, fixing things in the parks. I just, there was question marks in my opinion as to whether we were really getting a good bang for our buck. Now, it depends. I know the neighborhoods would probably view that differently. So maybe that's up to interpretation.
Yeah, and what I would really hate to see is for, there's a lot of folks in communities, and I think, you could even say in certain departments that are really trying to help reinvigorate NIAs And what is the group that is really vital, that where all the NIAs come together? Is that CAC? CA what?
CAC.
CAC. You know, these are challenging times. I just don't want it to be portrayed by us as a governing body that we think that we know better than what the neighborhoods do, especially in the core neighborhoods, in those that are underserved and those that are really struggling to get, you know, their neighborhoods up to par. And that's not for me to say, that's for me to hear what the neighborhood is saying. So thank you, City Manager.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I would like to know how much community action does. Brett, me and you discussed that. And do they fill up? Because I also need to look at the grants, and we need to revamp them. You know, what happened 20 years ago is not the same as what's happening today. And even what's happened 5 years ago is not the same as what is happening today. And then when we flags, and you can have wristbands, and hey, maybe we can get you t-shirts. I really think that we need to look at what is a need and what's a necessity, or a need and what's a want. And I think that's when the dynamics start changing, is when they wanted different things, but they couldn't have them. So this is what they could have. So then they start picking what they could have, which was some of the flags and stuff like that. And I think if we, you know, I've spoke with several NIA presidents and members these past 2 weeks, and they're just really, really upset. We've done some great money with those grants all over. And you look at Chesney, you look at Oakland, what they're doing. And I take, for instance, you know, when I go to the Chase Middle School track, you know, the other night there was like 17 people there. I remember going through that process with that grant money and trying to get more people moving and grooving and exercising. I look at the outdoor recreation, all the equipment at Hillcrest. That was the first outdoor equipment that they got that CDBG money. I mean, when I start looking at all of this, so I just don't want to know if it's the right time to take all this money out. I really don't. And also to challenge, and this is what I said to the NIA, is to challenge them to do some private partnership. You know, I think when there's a need and people know that there's a need, that they will give. And I look at Oakland and the bus stop, that was that private partnership, you know. So I'm just not really sold on this yet. Another thing is, I know we have, and I've discussed this, we have several people in the department that I don't even know what they do. And I'd like to know, I know what Corey does, I know what Monique does, but I don't know what some of the others do and what kind of guidelines that they're going to have. I know you're going to challenge them. And I know that you're going to, but I'd still like an indication of what they do. If this is just a big chunk, I know people are not happy with it. And they look at the low to moderate income is why we get this money. And so they really want to keep it in our low to moderate income areas. And I too I just think that we need to take a serious look and revamp that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Anybody else?
Question.
Councilman Padilla, to be followed by Councilman Lester, and apparently there's somebody else at the city.
Who first?
You.
Okay. I just want to address a little bit of what Councilwoman Ortiz is talking about. I have talked with the city manager about this, my interest in the empowerment grants and the thought process that we're using I'm encouraged that some of this is considering moving some of that money to the Housing Trust Fund. I think that's a good piece that maybe is getting overlooked. I think that anytime we have an opportunity to put some money into that trust fund, that I think it's a good one. With regards to how much should be taken out and used for the weatherization and so forth, I guess I want to make sure that the department and city manager has had the opportunity to really look at some of the projects. I know that we've kind of glazed over some of them that about flags that Councilwoman Ortiz talked about. Is that in conjunction with some other effort? I think sometimes what we see on the surface doesn't give us the full intent of what those projects hope to accomplish. I just want to make sure that the Citizens Advisory Council and others who have the opportunity to really go into some detail of what the intent is and what they're doing, that's given them the time to voice that. If it ends up coming out the same way that we are listening to today, then so be it. But I would feel much more confident if there was plenty of time for people to give their input into how that money could best be utilized by the NIAs. I know that sometimes there are pet projects, but I still think that the opportunity to put some money into that housing trust fund is an opportunity I would embrace. So I just wanted to make my comments on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir, and I concur. Councilman Lesser. Lesser, you had your hand up. I guess not.
I think I was just scratching my face, actually.
Oh. Okay, so Councilwoman Hiller.
Oh, thank you. Overall, I appreciate this conversation. I have some comments, but first, City Manager, with your reorganization of the department, were you expecting to kind of do any sort of overall review of programs and funding disbursement for the department this year?
At this point, that will be something that I will work with each director that assumes a part of the neighborhood relations department. When they receive their division, there'll be some time where they need to look at the types of services and activities that each of those divisions do to begin and understand it. And then at that point, we'll have discussions about what happens going forward. I would like their input as to, their fresh eyes, their new responsibility evaluated, and then make recommendations if there need to be changes.
Thank you. Just overall, I guess I do think, and I've said some things before, I think it's very timely for us to step back and do an overall review. And with this transition, it does seem like a good time, whether it's the internal programs of rehab and emergency repair and weatherization, as well as the big programs like empowerment and SORT. I guess we'll talk about it a little bit more with the results of the housing study as well. Personally, since the Housing Trust Fund has come up, I certainly support having a housing trust fund, but to me, the reason we do it is to get new money and add it to what we're doing, not just transfer the money we've already had over. So I personally would like to see that as the priority for developing the trust fund. I also was a little puzzled. I went ahead and asked to see the consolidated plan that's out for public view for next year, and it doesn't change anything, including the empowerment distribution. So I was puzzled about that. Maybe we can talk about it further. But the dollar for dollar, it was exactly the same as 2020.
Right. This was a recent change related to what we were finding from the housing study. And so that's a recent change that came up within the last month or so.
Well, really, they refused to take, they canceled the empowerment applications long before that. And so, because this conversation's been kind of flaming around for a while.
Right, the empowerment conversation, yes, we didn't want people to apply if indeed we were no longer going to have a program and spend that time and effort. So we made the decision now, obviously, if we change our mind with regards to what we want to do with an empowerment program and we want to keep it the same, then we can re-energize and establish a new application deadline.
Well, the con plan, which I guess we're going to see in a few weeks, still leaves it intact the way it was before as the staff proposal, which just surprised me. Thank you.
Yeah, and the one thing too to remember is that even though we talked about changing the weatherization to weatherization away from empowerment, it still has to be spent in a low-income area. It's CDBG money, and so it will go to help low-income people. It's not going to go anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And as we're talking about housing development and the trust fund, I think that it's really a good time for this body as we are making budget constraints and we don't know yet what the economy holds. We made the commitment to have a housing trust fund, and it'd be nice to see if we have any increases in our revenue streams that we can start making allocations into that trust fund. We have invested money to make sure that we could have a housing study. We know that it's an issue. The Greater Topeka Partnership acknowledges it's an issue, especially with the potential of organizations coming into our community and the upswing that we may see through plug and play. So it's one of those times that we have to start figuring out as we start looking at our budget, how we're going to make sure that we can actually start restoring our housing capacity and working on rehabilitation, especially in our core area that is so absolutely beautiful, that we should be able to have some sort of incentivizing fund that would help us create beautiful, available housing in our community. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think speaking to Councilwoman Hiller's concern about just reallocating money to the the housing trust fund, because we're going to trust that there's housing there. The fact that we're going ahead and reallocating some of these funds means that other people are going to buy into the program. That's how, whenever we had our discussion between Councilman Padilla, City Manager, and Jessica and myself, we were talking about how you put that money in there to go ahead and encourage more buy-in, especially since this trust fund has been sitting there ready to go for a while. Maybe we need to be those people to go ahead and step up to show that commitment again with this continued funding. And so I think that that's something important that we're hoping that by putting these funds into this area, that into this fund, that we're encouraging more buy-in. And I think to the point that the mayor was making, that this is one of the resources we need the most of, is the affordable housing, and making sure that this is a more equitable community, and this is a community that's ready to grow, not one that just says we are. So I'm really supportive of this, and I'm very excited about it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Here I am. Thank you, Mayor. On top of what everybody's saying about this with the housing study, et cetera, I just want to say, yes, we want plug and play is important. Having people, come into these neighborhoods and maybe renovate, some housing is important. I would say we have to be careful for gentrification and pushing people out that are barely able to stay in their neighborhoods, and equitable. We need to understand that some of the main things that housing study brought forth is there is not a living wage to support the poorest in this city to be able to get adequate housing. So I just think we need to really stay on the mark with that as well. Thank you, Mayor.
The mayor had to step out for a second. We need to move on. We have 38 minutes until 1 o'clock, and we still have agree to go. That leaves us about 10 or 12 minutes for police and fire, and 5 to 7 for municipal court. So I think let's go ahead and have Denise do municipal court. And that way, if there are those individuals that might need to leave, well, we all do, but Denise, if you would go ahead and do municipal court, please.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address the court budget this morning. Before I start, I just want to mention that due to furloughs and adjusting my hours, I'm a little rushed for getting caught up on emails and budget stuff, but I have been preparing the budget for a few years, so I am confident I'm able to answer any questions you might have this morning. So as I address the changes to the 2021 budget compared to 2020, in our efforts to reach the mandated reductions, aside from the benefits, personnel and benefit figures that have gone up, the areas that have significant changes were in our labor, in our audit and legal fees. There were some adjustments made there for both services provided. We do pay for our court-appointed attorneys and for our pro tems that cover when we don't have a judge available or a staff judge available. So there were some adjustments in that area for 2021. The significant adjustments on the negative side are based on internal services reductions, specific. So we were given for that. We did reduce our educational costs and training some. There's not a whole lot to be reduced in the court budget, but we did where we could reduce without having a significant impact on services. As with every other department, there are increases for the insurance to property, and so we absorbed those increases throughout the budget, as you will see, with various small amounts being adjusted off where we could from other lines. Bear in mind also that, and we are on page 97, by the way, I'm sorry I didn't say that initially. That's the department budget page, and then municipal court budget is made up of the judicial side as well as probation and the Alcohol, Drug Assessment and Referral Program, previously called ADSAP, which are on page 100 and 103. And so one thing to note about our personnel side is that we had to move some of the costs in order to get to the reduction that was necessary. We moved some of the personnel cost, a percentage of the probation court clerk 1 position over to the Alcohol and Drug Assessment and Referral Program budget. And that's how we were able to get to the amount. And the only other thing I want to touch on is our alternative sentencing court program, which we are pleased to say did not get cut. It will continue for 2021. And it's important to know, really looking at figures for ASC, you really cannot tell the effect of the program simply by the figures. The effect is reflected in the changed lives of the participants. And for the council members who are not familiar with the program, ASC was created really for defendants who had persistent mental illnesses that contributed to court cases. And so in an attempt to not only help the defendant, but to reduce the cost to the court, you know, through jail costs for getting arrested on multiple charges, we partner with Vallejo, the court-appointed attorneys, the prosecutor's office, and the VA. Don't want to miss anyone. And what they do is they just make sure that there's certain services readily available for those participants to help them with their mental challenges. And we see the effects of that in the recidivism rate, in that throughout the program from start, which was 2015, we've had 115 participants, and of those, only 4 have had new municipal court misdemeanor charges. So I think that's a great testament to the success of the program. And we're happy that it's going to continue for 2021. With that said, I'll stand for questions.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Vaughn? Thank you so much for that update, and I'm so grateful that we are not eliminating this valuable program. The Alternative Sentencing Court is a cornerstone in our community, and it's a great service to our community. Councilman Lesser.
I noticed we, under the probation office, that we did 876 urine drug screens in 19, up from 468 in 2019. Can you tell me what the cost of each one of those is, roughly?
Cost to the city per drug screen cup is about $5. And our standard process right now under a previous administration is to make sure that everyone that's placed on probation get a drug screening on entry into the probation program, and again prior to their probation ending. And during the year's term of probation, as indicated, the probation officers may test randomly. And so based on the number of probationers, that's where we ended up with those figures. Some people get tested more than others, depending on the violation for which they were convicted. But for a person, for instance, with just a theft offense would probably only get tested initially and at the end of probation, just to make sure they're not violating the terms of their probation, unless otherwise indicated during the term of their probation. So if they come in and they look or appear to be under the influence, the probation officer can do a random test. And we do, for positive tests, we do assess that back to the defendant, because we give them an opportunity to self-report. So if they've used, they can say that up front and sign an agreement or sign paperwork to that effect. If they fail to report and we have to test and they are positive, they're required to pay for that test. So they pay $5.
I guess that would be my question, is why are we paying for any of the tests? Why don't we assess that to them?
That's been historically what the court's done. I don't know that. I know there are some courts that do contract that out. And most courts actually pay for it themselves, except for those who contract it out. So it's just never, administrations prior to now have not requested that be done. It's definitely something we could look into, and with our new appointment of Mr. Thadani as our administrative judge, I will add that to my list of things to discuss with him on the 27th.
I think that would be great. I'd like to at least look into it. I don't know. I mean, I would feel that's more part of them accepting responsibility for their portion versus, I don't know why that would be something we would pay for. So I appreciate that.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Vaughn? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
City Manager, we move on.
Okay, so the next department up will be the fire department. Where's your
Good afternoon, morning, everyone. Madam Mayor, Council. Some of the points that I want to, follow up with you during this budget time is, looking at what we have done to get through 2020 and how or if any programs are going to be hurt at the next budget cycle. But right now, we do a lot of stuff within the community. We have community risk programs that are recognized throughout the nation to have positive impact on the safety, health, and welfare of its citizens. Specifically, smoke alarm install program. That's one of the big ones, and we work in partnership with the American Red Cross and other companies that donate smoke detectors for us to be able to give free smoke detectors out to the community. One thing I started when I first got here was the after fire neighborhood visits. This has been a good program where we have a residential fire. The next day, the fire crews will go out and visit homes, 5 homes either side of the structure fire and 10 homes across the street. We've actually received smoke detector, fire detector installation requests from those visits. Hands-only CPR that we've visited some companies and so forth. This is a national program again. And again, it helps with the safety, health, and welfare of the citizen. If someone's performing any type of CPR prior to our arrival, it really helps the patient. We're in the Team Up to Clean Up along with other departments within the city. This is a great program. We actually teamed up with Kansas Gas, where they donated reflective house numbers, and we've been able to go into the neighborhoods. And this has not only helped us, it has actually helped the gas company, because if they're going to have to do a gas line repair in the middle of the night, those reflective numbers really help them locating the residents that the work needs done at. School classroom visits, we still do that. Although all of these programs I'm talking about right now, because of the COVID, the current health issues going on in the country, all those programs have been on hold for now. Car seat installations, we do have individuals that are certified to install child car seats. People will come to the stations. We have done a few of those. We've been able to social distance from the installation and everything, and our individuals wear gloves and obviously the mask while they're doing the installation there. SAFE program, it's a special assistance in fire emergencies. People register online or call, and if there's a occupant of that structure who has difficulties maybe evacuating in a time of emergency, we know where they're located in the structure, where their bedroom is, where their living area is, and that helps us to prepare as we're responding to any scene, any incident at that address. The Citizens Academy, it hadn't been done since 2012. I brought it back again. It was well attended. The citizens were really appreciative of what we were doing and what we were with that Citizens Academy. Camp Courage, that was an all-female fire camp. That was the first one ever. It was very, very, very successful. In fact, we had people applying for the next one before we even advertised it. Again, we've had to hold that up. It was supposed to be actually around this time that this Camp Courage was supposed to be taking place. And we've actually had fire departments throughout the state call up and ask us to have copies of our Camp Courage program. The Explorer program used to be here in Topeka. I've worked with the Boy Scouts, and they're wanting to bring it back. Again, it's been held up with what's been going on in the nation. TCAL, we have stepped in with TCAL. They do have a fire EMS program, and we have allowed some of our trainers, inspectors, investigators, fire companies to go out and help in the teaching classes at TCAL, which has really, really helped them and helped us work in conjunction with the high schools. The permits cost, the only cost that we have with permits are fire permits. It's $5 to get a burn permit. We do have cost impact and recouping cost because we have a regional hazmat team. So anytime we're called out, that we will get reimbursed for manpower and equipment. If that happens, we do have the fire alarm ordinance that we're now putting together with since the new fire marshal has been put in there. They are setting up a payment if someone has exceeded their free false alarm. The new policy we have about that, they will receive a fee, a fine for overly utilizing the false alarm system. As for the impact right now on those budget cuts, we will have one shortage within here in administration. It was an account specialist. They have taken the opportunity to take initiative, and what we will do when they're gone is we'll actually spread the workload between the other people remaining in administration to take care of the daily needs of the administration. We did have a fire cadet program that we were trying to get started but each year we had to hold off doing that because of budget issues. So we have removed that from the program. From our budget right now, we're hoping with the partnership with TCALC, we're going to be able to do what we were trying to do with the cadet program. That is, entice young people to consider a career in fire EMS and then bring them into the fire department with some knowledge of what we do on a daily basis. The only other thing that affects us mostly, and it affects everybody, you know, the vacancy credits, you know, we understand budgets and everything, but the manpower, you know, currently right now we're basically 14 down. It's 10, but we've got 4 positions that promotions that need to be followed through with. And obviously there'll be a trickle down effect with them, but they're in specialty. So we are holding off on some of that there until we get through this budget crisis. But it is the vacancies that cause us to, you know, the overtime. And hopefully we were able to get the manpower up to where it should be. We're currently about 4 positions short on each shift right now. So we're behind the 8 ball before we have those people utilizing their time off, whether it be vacation or whatever, and then we have the on-schedule leave that we have no control over. If you want, I'm here for any questions from you. I know I got a message from secretly from Chief Cochran. He says, Craig, keep on talking, clock at least. So I'm here for any questions from you if you want to do it at a later time, or if you want to send me some questions so we don't run over the 1 o'clock hour. I'd graciously do so.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, can you tell me, because I thought I heard you say the one office specialist, but is there not a cut to someone position in training? Is that still happening?
Yes.
What'd you do, Michelle?
I didn't do anything. Booga, booga, booga.
What'd you do, Brent?
Okay, we're back again.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, so right now, you know, we were budgeted for 4 people, and to cut one of those training officers. Then that way we could fill that temporarily with the EMS chief, because that 4th position was for an EMS trainer. And so the chief of EMS would help to assist during that, which he did during the last academy. But we hope that we've had positions open on and off for the last 3 years. No one's lasted more than a few months in there and has come out of there. So it's trying to restructure that to a way that we have someone, when they sign up to become a training instructor, we can some way entice them to stay in that position. And sometimes they can't take the 8-hour days compared to the 24-hour shifts.
Right. Well, I think I might send an email to you on that later to move along. But the other thing is there any idea how much longer Station 1 is going to be shut down sporadically as the only station, as opposed to doing a rotation of other stations, so that the District 2 is not left so vulnerable?
Ma'am, that decision was made, I think it was in March. If I remember right, it was around March or something. And I actually was sitting in a meeting with the union during that time. And that was something we talked about. Apparently, historically, if there has been an issue with manpower for whatever reason, and they did have to shut a station, that was the one, even back then, that they utilized. And then Truck 9, if they were even really short, that they would do that. Truck 9 hasn't been so much this time, but I understand what you're saying, but it's critical to have the stations open, and it's a manpower issue.
Yeah, and I understand that. I just don't see why the pain can't be shared more around the city. My other concern with that is that what might not be happening, and I'm not saying deliberately, but a test run to see how this district runs without one as much, so that when it comes time to the move to try to shut down 11, everybody's going to say, well, they can do without one, without a station, because look at all this time we've been doing, they've been doing without station 1. And I hope that is not a factor that weighs into this when we start the conversations on Station 11. But, I just believe that we need to have both of them open in District 2. I know that these are issues with overtime, but I also believe that there could be some other stations that could share some of this suffering for their particular district instead of just District 2. So, but I'll send you an email on that as well, Chief, and CC the city manager. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Additional questions? I know that Councilman Lester.
Quick question. In regards to supplies that the fire departments need in regards to, such as food, groceries, cleaning, all those different things, I notice many times I'll see one of the engines parked at a grocery store or something like that. Is that primarily how we're utilizing as far as to go get, food for meals, cleaning supplies? Is that primarily how that gets handled?
Sir, the cleaning supplies, we supply them and we deliver them to the stations. It's a monthly supply list that each station has. So those cleaning supplies, that comes from the department to maintain that fire station. As the other issue that you brought up, when apparatus are out training or they're on a call and everything, and this has just been a traditional thing, they would stop by to pick up shortages of maybe their groceries or whatever. But we have, especially at this time, we have advised them, to try to lessen this as much as they can. And if they do, obviously they're wearing appropriate PPE when they go out there. One thing that we find out, you're a firefighter 24 hours a day. And we actually had a gentleman call me up and complain about a firefighter that went into a grocery store and wasn't wearing a mask or anything. And after a quick little exploring of what was going on, it was an off-duty firefighter wearing a pink firefighter T-shirt that, in remembrance of October and cancer, happened to be there. And he called the fire station, told him, hey, ribs are on sale. Do you want me to bring you some? So the guy followed him all the way to the station, and that way the guys didn't have to go out to the grocery store. He had brought the food to them. So, and he was off duty. So yes, it happens occasionally when guys go out on a call or anything, and as they drive by the local store, they may stop off to pick up something extra. But we're trying to lessen that and have them go out on their days off to pick up their groceries.
Yeah, I'd like to see if we could develop a policy for a variety of different reasons. Everything from, fuel use, this has came about with COVID as well. One third thing is, we've had our groceries delivered to our house for the last 4 months. I actually talked to Tony yesterday. Tony was getting his delivered yesterday. I actually even had a phone call with Dillon's about the possibility of them doing that for our firefighters at no charge as well. But my thought is, the wear and tear on the vehicles, the wear and tear of the heavy machinery, heavy engines on the streets, use of fuel costs, response time, as well as, just the inherent risk of a workers' compensation claim because of an accident, automobile accident, or a liability claim because of an accident involving another vehicle. I think now with the world that has changed, I think it's something that we need to look into, and if there's, I know there's going to be a cost savings there. It's going to be kind of probably hard a little bit to ascertain directly, but, clearly, based on those factors and the ability to have it delivered, I don't know why we would do it. And now even more so with the COVID, that we're not putting our firefighters in an environment of a grocery store, which is clearly not one of the cleanest areas.
I have made note of that, sir, and I will.
Perfect. Thanks, Chief.
All right. I don't mean to cut the conversation on fire, but we only have 15 minutes left, and we know that we have a 1 o'clock solid shut. If it's okay with the council members, if we could move on to the next department, and then if you could please email city manager all of the questions so that we can have a reply all or a report in our next meeting of all the questions being answered, that would be extremely helpful. Chief, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you get out without reporting.
Go ahead, Chief.
Chief Cochran, I think he's frozen. He's really trying to get out of there.
Sorry, I guess I missed something there. Well, thank you. Good afternoon. So I guess I'll start with on page 29, elimination of positions. Should have got those. Those positions that are being eliminated are both filled and vacant, and some of them are currently filled, but they'll be taking retirement. And one of those that would be a primary example would be the animal control supervisor. And with us taking on property maintenance, that supervisor is going to start assuming the role of the animal control supervision when that becomes vacant in the 2021. But that's currently filled, but it'll be vacant upon retirement. Some office specialists. The quartermaster's position is one that we're going to be eliminating. Quartermaster used to be a temporary position that was extra duty done by a full-time officer. Then under Chief Brown, that went to a full-time officer doing that as a full-time job. Then I transitioned it to a civilian, reclassified a civilian position. So long and short of it, it's a position that we feel confident that can be filled. That's an extra duty assignment. And so that's what that position there is. Also, we are eliminating 2 majors positions, and those will be refilled at the low end at an officer's position. But the elimination of those 2 positions, 21, is a significant salary savings, and also calls for a major restructuring of our commands and the organizational chart. But I feel very confident that the plan that we have in place will meet the needs of the city of Topeka as well as the citizens. So that's really kind of that on vacant positions. The next major thing for us is the decommissioning of the impound lot. We're about the only law enforcement agency in the state of Kansas and the Midwest and country for that operates its own impound lot. Those are contract services throughout everywhere else. And so even the sheriff's office has contract services. And so we are implementing the plan to decommission the impound lot by the end of this fiscal year. And so rolling into 2021, it'll just be a matter of getting rid of a few surplus vehicles. We're very confident in where we're going to be with that. Hopefully it will have contracts in place or ready to start negotiating contracts with private companies. And our plan, it's kind of a hybrid plan between what they do in Wichita, Sedgwick County, and Riley County. And we work with the DA's office also on the disposition of vehicles and how we hold particular vehicles. We have some vehicles down in our impound lot that have been there for 15 years that were part of a homicide investigation. Being outside like that for that long, there is no evidentiary value left for those. I even worked homicide, and not once did we ever utilize those vehicles. Pictures are the best thing. And so in working with the DA's office and then those other agencies on how they do it, we're very confident in that plan. The other big thing for us really is the increase in the General Funders Program. That's the mental health services that we provide through our behavioral health unit. And those we partner with, currently we partner with Vallejo to provide those services. The problem that we run into is Vallejo economically has hit very, and so we used to have a crisis responder on all 3 shifts, but at the end of June, we only have 1 on day shift now. And so meeting the needs that we need to have qualified mental health professionals that are in the field responding with the officers and working a lot of those calls and taking over those calls, I felt that was imperative that we find a way to fund at least the first and second shift. If I had my ruthers, it increased, another 50,000, and then we'd be able to meet the needs of all 3 shifts. But that's kind of the big, and that was on page 96, if we're curious on that. And then just our overall budget started on page 87. Highlighted points, I think, that are the primary interests, I believe.
All right, questions for Chief? I'll remind the team that we have 7 minutes. Councilman Padilla.
Just very quick. Just very quickly, Chief, I was noticing on your position overview and your reductions, there are a number of positions in the Community Outreach Division. My just general question is, in making those reductions, will it impact anything you are currently trying to do or plan to do with regards to reaching out to the public? Thank you, Mayor.
No, sir, because with us taking on property maintenance, they're going to be very involved in the community, which they are already. And I think that's a very natural fit that provides animal control as well, because a lot of the things that they deal with cross lines with each one of those type of units. So very confident in that. And then the volunteer coordinator's position, that was a position a couple of years ago that was managed by a sworn law enforcement officer in what would be now the Community Bureau. Some of those positions were added under chiefs prior to me because they were kind of neat to have positions and could help out and maybe alleviate some of the workload on sworn officers. But those positions that are being eliminated, I do not think honestly will not impact our community outreach efforts and stuff like that. And part of those that is not going to be a problem. I think it's actually going to be much more beneficial for the citizens of Topeka and work much more efficiently.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. A final question before we have to adjourn. Councilwoman Nager.
Not so much a question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not so much a question for the chief, but just a reminder for citizens that even though this is at the end of this workshop, this is not the last time we will be talking about specifically any of these budgets, but specifically TPD. So if you are curious and want more information, please email your city council representative, because this is just, and refer back to our meeting on Tuesday, because we talked about this at length and gave it really its due. I just wanted to bring that to the attention of anybody who's watching to make sure that we are doing a thorough job of this. So thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, could you wrap us up with the next instructions and the calendar and how we're going to cover whatever was left here that we didn't get to?
Well, we got through every department, but obviously if you think of a question that you feel didn't get answered, or as you study it, you want, obviously send it to Jessica and myself, and we will do the research and do a response. And obviously there's a number of questions here that we'll follow up on and provide you that information. And there were some that were in the individual or the small group discussions that we're beginning to create answers to. All that'll flow to you at some point. The next step we have is that Tuesday night, there will be a discussion with Public Works, with all of the various internal service funds and other funds that they have responsibility for, and we'll be going through some of those. And then on the 21st, we will talk about utilities budget. And then we have our special meeting on the 28th. As we look at the 21st, if you start seeing amendments that you want to see made within the budget, We need to be hearing about them really on the 21st to begin to formulate those so that we can take a look at what the impacts are. Because we still are trying to get this budget approved on August 11th, if at all possible. And I think for me, that's all I have, but I would toss it to Jessica just to make sure that if I've missed anything or any other instructions she would like to give, let her do the.
Jessica?
Yes, just real quick, the next steps, we'll go over internal service funds on Tuesday and then utilities the following week. And then we still owe some of the line by line budgets. We recognize that. We're hoping to get those out on Monday. And we are also working through the variety of questions that we've received in the small group meetings. We're hoping to get those out Tuesday. But if you receive those questions back and it doesn't reflect a question you asked, just let us know. We're doing our best to, keep up with a variety of questions. It wasn't intentional. But with that, thank you so much for participating and giving over your time on Saturday morning and now Saturday afternoon. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To our staff, I just want to say thank you for the arduous work of compiling this and going through this whole process with us. And to the council members, I want to echo what Jessica said. I know that it's a Saturday and you all work hours that nobody else understands that you do, because we're taking care of people and their needs. So thank you for devoting Saturday that you could have been with your families to be with us. And to the public that was here watching, stay engaged. We will keep talking about this on Tuesday. At this point, this meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful afternoon.